So we were talking about offensive, do you get offended? And if it's not easy to get offended, what would it be like if everyone offended you? You know, if you don't have allies, the concept of offense. So I want to talk about that with a story, because the Buddha was asked this, like, well, does anything offend you? And his answer was, let's say that I were to bring you a gift, and I hand you you were to bring me a gift, and I decide I don't want it. If I don't take it, whose is it? And the guy thinks about it. He's like, well, it'll still be mine. He's like, that's how you handle offense. If you don't take it, then it's not yours. It's the giver's. So in terms of being offended, when someone says, like, well, do you get offended? The thing is, you can't get offended if you don't take it. You know, someone can throw out all the offense in the world that they want, but if you're not willing to take it, it means nothing, and it's still theirs. And the irony in that is sometimes that makes them even more mad. It's like, but I want you to be mad. Like, but I'm not mad. Well, now I'm even more mad at you. But the thing is, if you don't take it, it's not yours. It still belongs to the person trying to give it. And anger is kind of the same way. In Buddhism, there's this story about the anger is like holding a hot coal with the intention of throwing it at someone. But while you're holding it, who's being burned? The only one is the person holding it. So anger and offense, these things are things that are given, but if they're not received, it's not a problem. Because it can only be a problem when I receive it. It's like if you give me something and I'm mad that you gave it to me, you're like, well, then why did you take it? But that's what we do with offense. We allow ourselves to be offended. And we think it's the fault of the person who offended us, but ultimately, only you can choose to be offended. Nobody can offend you in reality. Does that make sense? Yeah. Okay. Any other questions or comments? Okay, we're going to go on to the conclusion of all of this, the concept of learning to let go. First, I'm going to talk to you a little bit about the parable of the raft. So this is something I really, really like about Buddhism in general. Towards the end of his life, the Buddha was assembled with his monks at the edge of the river, and he asks them this question. He says, let's assume that you arrive at a river. Can you guys see that? Okay, it's kind of hard to see. So imagine you're at the end, at one end of the river, and you're trying to get to the other side of the river, and the only way to cross is to build a raft. So you start spending time and energy and devotion into this raft, because to complete this journey, the raft is a matter of life and death, right? It's that important. So you do this, you spend all this time, you get on the raft, you slowly make the journey. Once you get to the other side, he asks them, he says, now that you're on the other side, to continue the journey, is it wise to continue to carry the raft, or do you leave it behind? And they all sit there and they think about it, and they're like, well, it makes sense to leave it behind because you don't need it anymore. And then he tells them, that's how you are to view the Dharma. The Dharma is the teachings of Buddhism. What he was alluding to is that these are tools. The tools are to become awake, to see reality as it is. But the mistake is to attach to these things. If you attach, that's like crossing the river and now putting the raft on your back, and here you go, continue your journey. It's just not wise. And I remember the first time I heard that, I thought, wow, what spiritual tradition tells you, once you figure this out, let it go. Let go of all of it. You know, usually it's the opposite. Put another raft on your back. Keep on going. But this teaching can be applied to so many things that we do in life. In life, we encounter rivers and we make rafts to cross them. Relationships, friendships, jobs, these can be seen as rafts at times. And you get from point A to point B, and then you get to point B, and what do? You strap the raft on your back and you carry it for no reason. It's not necessary anymore. So I wanted to bring that to mind and have you think, what are the rafts that you continue to carry that you no longer need? And why is that even detrimental? Do any of you have any rafts?
Well, the conception of believing in something that is counter to your own benefit.
Okay. So beliefs can fall in that category. And I'm not even talking about the, religious beliefs or existential beliefs. I think those can also fall in this category. But what about just day-to-day beliefs? The belief that, we talked about earlier, that I'm not likable. That's a belief. And you probably carry it for a reason, but at some point it's detrimental to continue carrying that. What are some other rafts that we carry?
Sometimes you have friends who you've had all your life, and then something changes.
Mm-hmm.
Some people remain loyal to their own detriment, but you really should let go.
Uh-huh.
Not in a hurtful way, but it's like it's not doing anything for you anymore.
Right.
Serving anything but a detrimental purpose.
Right. Yeah, are there toxic relationships, toxic friendships? Of course. Why would we carry those around? And the answer here isn't to say, okay, now I'm justified in not liking someone. That's not what we're saying. But there are things that you don't need to carry around anymore. So the difference is we're not saying, oh, I don't need that raft, I'm going to burn it. Right? We don't need to do that either. So I don't need the raft. It's not necessary for me. Okay, any others? How easy is it to let go of a raft? To leave it behind? It's probably one of the hardest things that we do. One of the hardest things to try to do. So in the process of trying to let go of these things, we just keep carrying them. Now this can come in the form of someone offended me at some point in life. I'm not letting that go. Somebody, that especially with the example we just talked about, that's like they gave me the raft and I'm putting this on my back. Now I'm mad at you. You're making me carry this. Why did you accept it? We do that, don't we? There are many ways that we can carry the raft. So let's talk about another parable. There are two monks, and they are walking on a path, and they come to the river, and there's a girl at the edge of the river in her wedding gown trying to cross, but she doesn't want to get her wedding gown wet. So one of the two monks, the senior monk, puts her on his back and just crosses the river, doesn't think anything of it. And they get to the other side and they keep going on their way. And meanwhile, the younger monk the whole time is thinking, whoa, wait a second. We took vows to never touch a female. And he didn't even think twice. He just put her on his back. What is he doing? And it starts to fester. And time goes on and he's really upset. And finally he just stops them and he's like, whoa, wait a second. You need to tell me before we keep going, what was that all about? And he's like, what was what all about? He's like, you just picked up a girl. And he's like, oh, I put her down on the other side of the river. Why are you continuing to carry her? And it's a similar story to the idea of letting go. There are things that we think we let go of, and yet we carry them with us. Offense is a big one. Offense and anger and resentment. And we think, oh, that's fine. I put it past me. Yeah, well, then why don't you talk to me? Because I hate you. Because we continue to carry it. It's hard to let go of things. So what's the key? How do you let go of something? This is the crazy thing. Picture this in real life. There's something I can't let go of. How do I let go of it? There's only one answer. You let go. You let go. So non-attachment. We attach to things. We don't want to let them go. And sometimes, I've mentioned this, that we attach to non-attachment. We're really good at attaching to stuff. Alan Watts talks about this, and he's like, it's like we're standing at the edge of the cliff, and you're pushed off the cliff, and at the same time you're pushed off, this rock's following next to you. Your instinct is grab the rock. Well, what good is that doing for you? And it's this never-ending cliff, and you're just falling and falling, and at some point you realize, why am I holding onto this rock? So you just let it go. Like, well, nothing changed. our tendency is to grasp. We want to hang on to something. It doesn't matter what it is, but we have to be hanging on to something. And the nature of being free is letting go. You know, when you're in the pool and you're learning to swim, grasping does not help. You can't be grasping if you're drowning. It's the moment that you let go that you start to float. And our tendency is to want to cling and grasp. So the key to learning to let go, as cliche as it sounds, is will you just let go? And I know it's not as easy. It's much easier said than done. But it starts with understanding that it starts with me. The things that are causing me pain in life that I carry on my back, it's on me. I can't be mad at, the person who offended me or an institution or whatever it is I'm mad at. I'm the one carrying that. And it's not going to go away till I'm the one who lets go. It's not holding me, I'm holding it.
So what do you do when you intellectually you let go? And you think you're done. But then you continue having the feelings. Then what?
Yeah. Well, did you let go?
Well, obviously you didn't completely, but how do you get to that completeness?
Yeah. That's a good question. And I don't think there's just one answer to that. It takes time. There are other circumstances that probably go into that whole equation of when and how you let go of something. I mentioned earlier that story. For me, for years I thought I had finally gotten over hating this person in my life who caused me a lot of pain. And I would go through thinking the reason I was letting go of the anger is because I was supposed to not feel anger. That's the only reason. I'm a good person who's not supposed to hate people. So, okay, now I don't hate them. But then something would trigger me like, I still hate him. It wasn't until almost an involuntary experience that shifted my perspective. It was that moment, like I said, watching my son get on the bus that changed it. Now, I didn't plan that, and I didn't prepare for it, and I guess the only preparation I had done leading up to that point is thinking this is something I want to let go of, and I don't know how. And I practice mindfulness, and I practice meditation, and thinking if I sit here long enough, it might go away, and it doesn't. But then, because I had been practicing it at some point in life, it happened. And it happened looking at my son get on the bus.
When you have to pause, put that moment, let it in.
Yeah. And that's why we practice the pause between stimulus and reaction. You're practicing creating a gap. The more you practice, the better it gets. And inside of those gaps, suddenly you discover something that you didn't know that you didn't know. And it happens. And they talk about this in Buddhism. It's like, well, if you think that the key to this is by trying harder, that's like saying, I'm going to catch this butterfly, and you're chasing it all over the field, and you just can't catch it. Or a fly. A fly's harder. But the minute you sit down, it comes and lands on you. You're like, oh, seriously? And that's kind of how life happens. It just happens. So the part of the acceptance, and I mentioned this earlier, acceptance in this position of, well, there's something I can't let go of. Well, you start by accepting that you can't let go of it. I don't know how. Remember, the not knowing is a huge part in Buddhism. And not knowing includes, I don't know how to get rid of this anger. I just know that I don't want it. And maybe one day it'll go away. But I can't, the more you force it, the longer it lingers. Remember, we talked about this with emotions earlier. The key is you're with it. And you visit it, and you befriend it. And you're like, yeah, I don't like this guy. Interesting. I'll spend time with that. Why? And you let it be what it is, and then it just goes away. Because all things are impermanent.
So isn't there a process of rewriting the story around what it is that caused that anger or that emotion to begin with?
Yeah, I think so.
Or evaluating why you believe. Mm-hmm. At some point you can shift your perspective. Mm-hmm. And now you've got a new story that doesn't involve them.
Yeah. Yeah, I think so. Because remember, we can't escape our stories, right? That's what we do. We make stories. Amy.
How do you do you let go of somebody who has been abusive to you?
Sometimes bad things do happen, and there's no story we're ascribing to it. It actually happened.
Yeah. Yeah, so when things happen and the reality of it is, the reality itself is painful, like abuse is a really good example there. In no way or in no way am I ever trying to imply that you arrive at understanding, oh, that's not good or bad. It's just, I'm not saying that. But what happened can be a negative thing. It was detrimental, it was painful, it can be all of that. But you look at the source. Remember causality versus meaning. When we're stuck in the mindset of finding meaning, it gets really tricky. But if we can shift that mindset and say, what is the cause behind this? What caused this person to do this to me? You're not condoning it in any way, but there's room for compassion and there's room for understanding the events that led to that. And there's room for compassion for yourself for going through that. And I know that's very tricky, and I haven't gone through something like that. I mean, the closest I can compare is like the scenario that I went through. And for me, one of the biggest shifts in my mindset was realizing it was never personal. It wasn't the intention of, I'm out to get you specifically. It was a selfish decision that was made on the part of someone who was ignorant, and I took the heat of it. I was affected by it.
I'm afraid, but see, I have fear that they will hurt me again. So I don't know. I guess it's complicated.
Yeah, I mean, you don't want to stay in a situation that's dangerous, that can hurt you. I think that's an example of a relationship that's like a raft. There needs to be a disconnect there. And even if that's someone close, it's like, sorry, this can't work. That's okay. That's okay, because again, I want to be clear. I'm not saying that in scenarios like that, you need to accept people and accept what they do. I'm not saying that. I'm saying it's wise and healthy to see a scenario like that and look for the causes, and then you understand it a little bit more. And you can even say, wow, I understand where this is coming from, and I don't want to have anything to do with it. And you take a step back.
Yeah. So they have mental illness. Or
Exactly. Yeah. Yeah. Anything else?
So what if your raft is tied to your identity? How do you release that? How do you separate that? Because that makes the raft harder to let go.
Oh, yeah. Yeah, what if your identity is, I'm a rafter? Like, oh, let go of your raft. Yeah, that makes it tricky. So I think in terms of identity, we spend time looking at who we think we are because we're trying to deconstruct our sense of identity with realizing that it's impermanent. And it may be, it could be that if my identity is attached to the raft, then maybe it's not time to let go of it because that's still part of who I am. And it could be a difficult transition time where you're trying to figure out, do I let go of the raft? Because ultimately, the answer isn't let go of the raft, and the answer isn't stay on the raft. The only reason it's a problem is if you're done and you shouldn't be on it and you won't get off, that's a problem. But if you're still on it and it means something, then stay on it. Does that make sense? And sometimes what may have been a raft for me, someone else is still on it. And the last thing you want to do is say, hey, you're in the middle of the river, jump off that raft and try to swim to me. That's not going to work. So I think it takes introspection to know, in what way what are my senses of identity? Where does my sense of identity come from, and what is that attached to? What things should I let go of? What things am I not ready to let go of? That's all just a personal choice, and I think it takes time and introspection to arrive at that. And it should not feel forced. It shouldn't feel like someone's telling you, hey, let go of that raft. I want to be clear about that too. I'm not saying, let go of all your rafts. I'm saying what the Buddha taught is, when you've completed the journey, is it wise to continue carrying the raft? He didn't say, hey, that raft is, jump off of it. You know, when you need it, it's a matter of life and death. That's how important a raft is. But when you don't need it, now it's just dead weight and you're carrying it around. The very same thing that at one point meant a matter of life and death in life, only 20 minutes later is now an anchor that you're just pulling. And it's the same thing. It's the same raft. Time changes, perspective changes, because remember, all things are impermanent. Life is constantly changing. Does that kind of answer?
Because your identity changes too.
Yeah. Yep, your identity changes. And your identity could go from being, I am a raft paddler, to I'm a raft burner. You know? I don't know. Yeah. Okay, anyone else? All right, I want to show you another slide. This is one of my favorites. Have you guys played Tetris? Who hasn't played Tetris? Okay, 4 of you. I'm going to show you this quick video. The idea of Tetris is that these shapes come out of nowhere, and you have to try to piece them in wherever you can, and the goal is to not leave empty spaces. Now, I had to pick a game that was halfway done, or you'd be watching it for a while. But the goal is, or the objective here is you don't pick what shows up. Here it tells you that's what's coming next. So you have a little bit of time to figure out, all you can do is move it left and right, and you can spin it. And you try to make the best that you can with the very limited time that you have before the next piece comes. So if you watch, this person's trying to place it, and then, you know, it happens fast. There comes the next one, and if you didn't do it right, you leave another blank space, and you want to complete all the spaces because that's what makes them disappear. But if you don't do it right, it keeps going up and up, and once you've played it long enough and you didn't do it right, game over, and that's it. So see, they're pretty much done. Game over. And I love talking about Tetris because life is like a game of Tetris, right? Do we know what's coming next? No? I mean, we have limited ability. I know, I mentioned this before, I know that if I go rob a bank, one of the pieces that might come next is I go to prison and the police are chasing me. So there's limited control there. But in the grand scheme of things, we're playing Tetris. And we have limited ability to manipulate these pieces when they show up. Sickness, old age, death, loss. These things just happen. And when they do, you're still figuring it out and the next one shows up. And that's how we go through life. We don't control what shapes show up next. We just try our best to work with the shape that we got before the next one arrives. And if you think about that in your own personal life, it makes the process a little bit more enjoyable because the mistake that we make, we're playing the game of life as Tetris with the illusion of thinking that we control what comes up next. So when it doesn't come up the way we thought that it was supposed to, you're yelling at the game. I didn't want a square, I wanted a bar. Or I didn't want the bar, I needed an L. Or whatever it is. And if you're to visualize someone playing Tetris and they're screaming at it as it's happening, wouldn't that be kind of silly? It's like, but it doesn't change what comes next. And it doesn't change the speed that you still have to hurry and move that because there comes another one. And that's life. That's more of what life is all about, is it's just happening. And it's happening and you're the one who decides, oh, this is a bad shape. Oh, this one's a good shape. Or what may have been a good shape at one point is I need this L, but now that line's done, I don't need the L anymore. And then you get another L. And at one point you would have been like, yay. But now you're like, I don't want that. I want something else. Isn't that life? Okay, let's talk about non-duality. Applied to the sense of self, it's you versus the you that you think you're supposed to be. And it's not just the you that you think you're supposed to be, there's also the you that someone else thinks you're supposed to be, right? And it gets pretty problematic. And all of these none of those are actually you, because there's only just you and the way that you are. Now, you can be introspective with your own life and decide, well, this is how I am, this is how I want to be, and you can make changes towards that. I'm not saying that that's a problem. The problem is thinking that you're something that you're not, or that the way that you are It becomes a problem when I can't accept who I am now. Because, again, applying this to acceptance versus resignation, right? Someone who has an addiction cannot get rid of that addiction without first accepting that they have an addiction. Isn't that right? So now if there's the you that's different from the you that you want to be, can you ever get to what you want to be if you cannot accept the you that you are now? In the same way as accepting addiction, you can't. You can't. So sometimes people will push back when I talk about acceptance, accepting you the way that you are. They'll be like, but I don't like who I am. Like, okay, well then you can do something about it if you can first acknowledge that you are what you are. You are what you are. And Buddhism focuses on this a lot. It's constantly trying to get us to understand that you are what you are. And there's nothing wrong with that. There's no wrong way to be unless you have a problem with how that is. And it's by accepting who you are that you can change who you are. You can't change who you are unless you accept who you are. And if you do change it, it's not because you're supposed to change it, or it's not because, I guess there are a lot of reasons, but does that make sense? Kind of? Okay. So non-duality. I talked about this a little bit earlier with someone, with Tom actually, when we were out there. It's the concept of what happens to us when we die. That's one of those questions that everyone kind of wants to know. And it's one of those that, well, the only people that would ever know are the ones who've died, right? I mean, we can assume, we can have stories, there's all kinds of explanations, and I'm not saying any of those are wrong because we just don't know. But the Buddhist explanation of this fits in with this concept of non-duality. It's saying you were never separate from everything that is. You might perceive that you are because you're perceiving life through the lens of you right now, right? But you have always been the sum total of everything that makes you you. Every single cause and condition that's led to this specific moment, you've been all of that all along. So what happens when we die? The Buddhist answer would be somewhat like saying the ocean has waves, and when the causes and conditions are right, waves are created. And while a wave is rolling and the wave is there, it's there. And this wave is different than this wave, right? It's a wave. But what happens when a wave finally crashes on shore or just dissipates in the ocean? It goes back to being what it always was. It was the ocean. It's just the water. And there's this understanding in when we're teaching Buddhism that we have never been anything separate from the universe. So Alan Watts says, we are something that the universe is doing in the same way that the ocean is, or a wave is something that the entire ocean is doing. And that's what we've always been. And if you think back to, well, what was I before I was what I was? Well, you were whatever you were, And you were. This is what's kind of interesting. In a literal way, you were and are your parents. Doesn't matter if you like them or not. You don't exist without them. And you are, well, before that, well, they were their parents, and you are their parents. You've always been all of that. And going forward, it's the same way. There's this fear of, when I die, I don't want to end. Well, what if you understood that you can't end? The moment you create or interact with the world, everything that you do, that's you going on. And that can be in the form of, in having kids. I can't die. I'm already existing in them. There's no change there. You might say, well, what if all of you died in an airplane? Well, everything that you've ever done since you've been alive, this is karma. Karma comes back in here. Action. Everything that you do has an effect, and it goes on and on and on. So the mere fact that you exist has forever changed existence. It'll never be the same because you're here. And everything that you've done and everything that you'll ever do, there's no fear in what happens without me because it's like you already did it. You've already changed the entire existence of the universe because you exist. Buddhism is anchored in the present moment. It's anchored in the present moment. It's always here, it's always now, and this is it. And I've talked about that. And because this is it, and we're anchored in the present moment, there's no fear or concern of what will be. Because in one way, my concern about what happens to me when I die is really no different than the same concern I have of what happens when I get home today. I don't know. I mean, I guess I have a better idea. I'll probably eat cereal, watch the Olympics. But in a way, we never know what's coming. You know, it's like saying, well, what's going to happen if I lose my job? Well, I don't know. What'll happen when you lose your job is that you lose your job, and then you figure it out. What happens when I get a flat tire? What happens is you get a flat tire and you figure it out. And that's always been the nature of it. And for some reason, we're much more concerned about after us than we are before us. You know, we don't sit here and think, why wasn't I born 10 years earlier? You know, the world needed me 10 years before I was born. We don't really do that. But we certainly do it the other way. I want to stretch it 10 more years because what's the world going to be without me? Well, it'll be what it was without you before you were here. It'll be fine. So there's this sense of comfort that comes in knowing that you don't know. We've never known anything. And if you think about that, we've never known anything other than the present moment. That's why we anchor ourselves in the present moment, because there's no way out of it. All it's ever been is what it is in the present moment. It's always here, it's always now. Whether you're here or not, it's always here and it's always now. So we go through life like this, right? Chasing, what is it we chase after? What are some of the things we chase after? Money, success, respect. Yeah, to end suffering. Cereal. Yeah, why do we chase after those things? I mean, we say, oh, I want money, but ultimately, what do we want? What do we think money is going to give us? Security. What does security give us? Comfort. And if we're comfortable, we're what? Who said it? Happy. Happy. This is called the happiness trap. Because is happiness something that you can get and hold it, and there it is, my precious? We can't, right? Happiness is an emotion. So chasing after an emotion, well, why not chase after sadness? Why not chase after anger? You know, they're just emotions. And we experience them. We just happen to like how it feels to be happy, and we don't like how it feels to be sad, so we decide, okay, well, I want more of this and less of that. But then we make the mistake of thinking that you can actually trap it and make it permanent. Happiness is a permanent thing. If I do this, if I avoid this, I finally get it, and there it is, it's mine, and I'll be happy the rest of my life. And the nature of impermanence, the nature of change, is that you cannot get it. You can't trap it. You can experience it, and you will. And then you won't, and then you will again. And that's the nature of it. That's the nature of change. So to chase after it, thinking it's something that we can trap, we're just like this. Or the hamster wheel, whichever one of those visuals makes more sense to you. But we're chasing after something that we can't have. And the irony is that there is a way to happiness. There is a way to happiness, and it's gratitude. Think about this. When you're thankful, you're happy. And our mistake is we think it's backwards. If I'm happy, then I'll be thankful. But it doesn't work that way. So, and you can't fake it. You can't say, okay, well, I'm just going to be thankful for everything. This is where mindfulness comes in. Because if you're mindful about the way that you live, you start seeing gratitude in things you never, ever thought of, ever. And I'm telling you this out of experience. I've been practicing this for years now. And last week, I came home and I learned something from one of my teachers that had never crossed my mind. And he said, have you ever thanked your shoes at the end of the day? It's like, thank my shoes? No. It's like, they carry around your stinky feet all day. You've never thought to thank them? I was like, no. And I thought about it that day, and I went home and I was like, I don't even know how many shoes I have. I mean, I've got 4 or 5, but it's not like we're close or anything. And it was fascinating to spend time looking at them and realizing I've walked around China in these shoes, and these I took with me, hiking up the hills back here, and realizing I've never thought once to be grateful for my shoes. And I couldn't do a ton of the things that I do if I didn't wear shoes. And it was interesting to have that moment of introspection and to be grateful for something that had never crossed my mind. And later that day I thought, well, what else am I not grateful for? And later that day I was at work and I was depositing a check from one of our customers, and I'm signing the check, and I was like, thank you, pen. And then I deposited the check on my phone. I was like, thank you, phone. And I was like, wow, I should be thankful for everything. Gratitude helps us to be happy. And it's not that we're trying to be happy. The key isn't to chase after happiness. The key is to be mindful of the fact that we have a lot to be grateful for in life. A lot. And usually we don't think about it. Have you ever stopped at the red light and be like, thank you, red light, you're controlling everyone here? We don't think that, right? In fact, we're thinking the opposite. Stupid red light, turn green, I want to go. And yet the red light for me means it's green for them. You're like, yeah, you guys go. Because we only want to win and we never want to lose, right? We only want happiness, we never want to be sadness. We never want sadness. But what happens when I don't have to chase after happiness? Well, the pursuit of happiness, the irony of the pursuit of happiness is that happiness is in the pursuit. If you can find happiness in the pursuit, now it doesn't matter if you ever get there, because it's not about getting there. It's about enjoying the journey. And you think about this, I took a train ride one of the times I was in Europe for work, and I took a train ride, and I was waiting from London to Brussels. It's on the Eurostar, so it's the high-speed train. And I was so eager to get there, and I think there were like 3 or 4 stops along that path. Every time the train stopped, I'd get out and I'd be like, this is a cool little town. This is neat. There's vendors here, or whatever it was. And then get back on there, and back in my book till the next stop. And by the time I got to the end, I was like, I did not even look out the window and just enjoy the ride. It's the first time I've ever gone through the French countryside, and I didn't even see it. And I thought, wow, isn't that how we live life, though? Always looking for the next stop, always waiting for the next milestone, and we don't just enjoy the process because we think that there's an end goal. We're like the donkey chasing the carrot, thinking, well, I'm not stopping till I finally get it. But the point was, you could stop all along and just be, and just enjoy it, and experience gratitude. See, once you realize you don't have to be happy, you can be content. It's like realizing now that I don't have to be perfect, I can just be good. Well, the same applies to this logic. Now that I don't have to chase happiness, I can just be grateful that I'm here, I'm alive, I'm experiencing it all. Because like the Tetris game, at some point it's over. And you think, well, did I win? It's like, well, in Tetris you don't win, you just play until you die. I tell my wife this all the time and she hates it. I say, life is like a video game. It gets harder and harder and faster, and then you die. She's like, well, that's no fun. It's like, it is if you like playing a game. It's a game. Alan Watts used to say, it's when you realize that life is a game, then you can start to enjoy it. Because then it's all part of the game. You just enjoy it. Because there's no end goal. What's the end goal? Well, the goal is just to play the game. So that's what I wanted to end this on, talking about the pursuit of happiness, the relationship between gratitude and happiness. And so before we jump into anything else, so I have a podcast, the Secular Buddhism podcast, and from this project I created the Foundation for Mindful Living with the goal of making mindfulness and contemplative practice accessible to anyone who's interested in it. And that's why I do the podcast. And on the podcast, I talk about topics like we talked about today. And I'll spend 20 to 30 minutes just on one topic. And I try to do one every week. And I have about 24 episodes now, something I started this year. And it's already the number 3 podcast for Buddhism worldwide. And for me, that was really exciting, even though there's no goal with it. It's something that I do because I enjoy. But it made me realize what I really want to do is make this available to anyone. That's why we're filming this today. This is something that I feel, if it's what you're looking for, it should be accessible to you. You should be able to just find it and learn this and not have to pay or do anything. It should just be there. And that's my goal with this. And this is possible because of you guys, because you guys were willing to contribute and to help me put this on. And I've mentioned this before, I don't make anything doing this. I do this because I enjoy it. So I'm very grateful to all of you for being willing to come out here and to listen and to contribute to the costs for all the snacks and drinks and stuff like that. And anything that goes beyond the cost of this gets rolled right into the next one. So I'm doing a workshop in Seattle, and that one's more expensive because I have to fly there. And then I'm doing the London one. The only reason that works is because I have to go to Germany for work anyway. So it was a minimal price difference in the airfare to just go to London and then take the train. And like the London one is one where that one, it's actually going to cost me about $200 to go do that workshop. But people there wanted it, and I want to go do it, and I'm in a position to be able to do it. And I only bring that up because I want you to know this is just something I'm passionate about. It's something I enjoy, and I feel like I'm not trying to sell anything. I'm not trying to convince anyone of anything. I'm just trying to say, hey, we're like the donkey, and you're running around chasing the carrot, and you don't have to. You can pause, and you can just enjoy life, and life can be fun. And fun means it can also be sad, and it can also be painful, and it can be everything, because the point isn't to eliminate the negative and only have the positive. The whole point was to enjoy all of it. And what makes it so special is that it's unique. You know, it's like the clouds in the sky. You see a cloud, and it's unique because that exact shape will never be seen again. And even while you're looking at it, the cloud's shifting into a new shape. So every moment that you're even seeing a cloud is a unique moment that'll never, ever happen that way again. And that's how I see life. You know, the events of the past or the events of the future, instead of seeing them as good and bad, this is a good memory, this is a bad memory, I see it as unique. And a bad experience is only bad from my perspective. And that doesn't mean that it's actually good. It can be bad, but it is absolutely unique because I'll never go through that again the way that I did the first time. And it could happen again. I mean, you can get a flat tire and then get another flat tire, but it's not the same because we're constantly changing. Life is constantly changing. So as life is unfolding, as you're playing this Tetris game, if you were able to pause the configuration of the board and the pieces and all of it, it's always unique. And I think it's a really incredible experience to see life that way, to see life as just this set of unique moment-to-moment experiences that have never been experienced that way before and will never be experienced that way again. And then it makes the moments that are difficult not enjoyable, but it makes them special because I realize they're unique. And moments, you know, the moments are just unique moments. So that's kind of what I wanted to end on. Do you guys have any questions that we could go into like question and answers session now or end it early or whatever you guys want to do?
Who is Alan Watts that we keep mentioning?
Alan Watts. Alan Watts was a philosopher who studied Eastern philosophy, Buddhism and Hinduism, and back in the, I'm not even sure what years, it was, I want to say 40s or 50s, made Eastern thought popular in the West. And he has some fascinating stuff, books, talks, lectures, a lot like this. He talked about Eastern philosophy applied to everyday living. But yeah, so if you want to learn more about all this kind of stuff, I would recommend books by Alan Watts. Stephen Batchelor is another really good author. He has a book called Buddhism Without Beliefs, and that was kind of my introduction to secular Buddhism. There's a book called Joyful Wisdom. That's a book about Buddhism. There's one called Rebel Buddha that I really enjoyed. That was one of the earlier books that I read. I should come up with a list. Maybe I'll put it in our Facebook group. Has everyone joined that group? So I created a Facebook group called Developing Mindfulness Salt Lake. I can email the link to everyone. I thought I emailed it to everyone. But if you click that, you can join the group. I can post on there, or I'll send you by email all of this information. I'll send you all of the slides. I'll send you a summary of all of the topics that we talked about. I just barely finished a book called Secular Buddhism, and it's being edited now. And when that's done, that's something I can make available for you online too, if you wanted to read that. It's a lot of this stuff, the topics here. There are a lot of resources out there to just practice mindfulness. The thing I would say, if you enjoy this process of trying to become mindful, meditation is really the key. And it's something that you practice consistency over duration. It's not about sitting there for 4 hours. That's not going to do anything for you. I mean, maybe it will if you build up to that, but it's about becoming accustomed to sitting regularly and being with what is. That's been the problem all along, is that we don't know how to be with what is. We don't like to be with what is. We want to change it. So what if you practiced just being with what is? Then as life unfolds, it's not such a problem because you're already used to just being with it. So I would definitely recommend you continue your practice of meditation every day. And practice what we did in here. Just observe. Observe your thoughts, observe your emotions, observe your physical sensations, and just observe. That the whole thing is shifting the mindset from thinking mind to observing mind. That's really the key to meditation. So you're just watching and being with it. Because that's what we're not good at in life. What else? I can send you book recommendations in that email or put it in the Facebook group. If you guys want to, or you're in a position to, download the podcast, listen to it. There are a lot of topics on there, and I add new ones every week. If you want to and you're in a position to, consider donating to the Foundation for Mindful Living. Whatever's donated there is going to be used specifically to promote this workshop, the book, and anything that promotes mindfulness, to make it accessible and available to anyone. My goal, like I said before, is to make it accessible online so anybody can just learn this and take this course. And that's it. If you guys don't have any questions or comments, I guess we can end it.
I have one question. Did
Sure.
you say you were going to send us a PDF of notes?
Yes. Yeah, so I have a PDF that is kind of a summary of everything that I talked about here. But I wrote it a long time ago, so there might be stuff on there that I didn't say. And you're also going to have access to this recording. If you ever want to watch any of these modules again, these will be available for you to watch online if you want a refresher. Yeah. Anything else?
Do you have any recommendations for guided meditation?
Oh, yes, I do. Recommendations for guided meditation. I was going to mention there are several apps, really good apps out there. There's one called Calm. There's one called Headspace. The one I was using here is called Insight Timer. Yeah. Those are three that I've used that I kind of switch between. Does anyone else use an app that you would recommend?
It's called Stop, Breathe, Think.
Stop, Breathe, Think. Oh yeah, I've downloaded that one before. Stop, Breathe, Think. Yeah. Sam Harris has one called 10% Happier. And that's a very secular-oriented one. Those are the main ones I can think of. And if you just look online, there are a lot of meditations online, probably on YouTube. You can find a bunch there. But there are a lot of different types of meditation. And some forms of meditation, their whole goal is just to get you to relax. So what we do, insight meditation or mindfulness meditation, is more about learning to just be with what is. There's not necessarily the end goal of relax. Like you can go lay on your couch and watch a movie and do that. Insight comes from being open to having that attitude of faith, that attitude of openness to whatever is. That's what we're trying to practice. Because you're not going to learn anything inside of the space of there's nothing. If I think there's nothing for me to learn, well, guess what? I'm not going to learn anything. But if I'm open to my ideas and my beliefs and my concepts, and they're just kind of open to maybe it is, maybe it's not, that's where there's room for growth, because something might present itself and I'll be willing to say, oh, I didn't expect that. I didn't think that it was this way or that way. Anything else? All right. Well, if you guys want to take any of those lunches with you, feel free to do that. And if you don't mind folding up these folding chairs, I'm going to take those back downstairs to that closet. And that's it. I hope you guys have a safe journey home, and thanks again for coming and being a part of this. So thank you guys.